Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome back to the sandbox mode, and a very quick little PID check. In today's episode, we're going to be building a brand new hovercraft from scratch, most likely a medium to small sized craft, but who knows, which will be using the missiles as the main weapon type. And the idea is it's going to have 2 or 3 of the very large missiles, and then a whole host of the smaller launchers. This way we can send in the small missiles first, then after a delay send in the larger variant. This way any flares or radars being thrown off the enemy might not affect the large missiles as well, thus negating that one negative. Or I could just set them to be controlled by the AI and then that wouldn't really happen. But anyway, let's get building. It's been a very long time, so I expect this to go not the quickest. So a quick update from the previous video in regards to explosive missiles. Now a lot of people have commented about them and how they work since they have changed somewhat recently in terms of the radius. Originally I thought that perhaps they had gone that the radius is now accurate, so if it has a 100 meter radius it would do damage to a 100 meter area, or it was still going by the old 10 meter radius system, which was quite a long time ago, but instead it's sort of in between. According to quite a few sources, the explosive radius is now 35 meters, and honestly this gap here is a pretty good example of that. Now sadly, the explosion wasn't quite strong enough to continue to the full radius, but as you can see it is definitely more than 10 meters total. From here to the other side it's actually nearer to 20, but sadly a lot of the damage seemed to have been absorbed and I should have used a larger missile, but still, that's just a nice update, and it's good to know that very powerful explosives can do a very large area of damage. In regards to how the damage drops off, on the other hand, that I have not looked into yet because too many numbers. Today, we're just building. Now here's something I kind of want to use but think it'll be a little bit out of place. This is the huge steam boiler. Now it's no exaggeration to say, I think I've used steam power on maybe 90% or more of my crafts in the past. I absolutely adore steam power, I love how it generates energy, it's very simple to set up, and I just like it for its looks above all else. Well now, we have the huge variant, which is honestly terrifying looking. Here are the old large variants. This is the new huge variant. Yeah, I might end up using this, but I will probably just use it for energy production, which is a bit of a waste and why I'm saying it's a bit out of place. In the future, I will be building a new battleship, which will be using, of course, the new propellers, which are just absolutely insane, which need all of this stuff to work. Still though, that'll be fun in the future. Will I use this? Who knows. The internal block is complete, so this ugly thing is just holding all of the bare necessities. So we have the AI here tucked away in some stone. Normally I use wood, but at the moment I am trying to use stone a little bit more since it's a bit more protective, and it does have the same EMP resistance as wood. We then have several layers of armor later. We have the steam boiler, and then several layers of armor later. Once again, we have the batteries, although I think I've gone way too overboard here, and we do not need as much at the back here. So I'm going to split this and probably add some ammunition to the back, and then add a few small ammunition stores around the ship. That way, we don't lose all of our fighting power after being hit by one shot. Same with the batteries as well. It's a boring start, but it's a start. Well, it's taking way longer than I expected, but we are finally making some progress. The inside is actually now very well armored. The last take was not as good as I thought it was, so I had to tear down a lot of it and just remake it all. It's still essentially just a functional block at the moment, but still, there's going to be plenty of space. I'm going to be building this 2-tiered on the top, and then have a sort of pseudo keel at the bottom. It's not really going to function in any way, except for maybe to add some extra armor, maybe some of the turning thrusters, and then it's going to stay relatively small other than that. Now the weapons, I actually don't know where they're going to go. What I'm thinking of doing is perhaps having 3 of the larger missiles, 1 tucked underneath here, 1 underneath here, then 1 in the center, and then have a couple of missile pods at the back, which will fire the cluster missiles. And then have the larger missiles on a delay, so what should hopefully happen is all of the cluster missiles fire first, they distract any anti-missile stuff the enemy is sending, perhaps some flares and such, and then the larger missiles go through and do the bulk of the damage. Hopefully. So one issue has arisen, which may change how I build this craft completely. So right now, we have the missiles facing forwards, which I think is going to look the best. The problem is, with our current settings, what's going to happen is that we're just not going to face the enemy all that much because we are acting like an airship. An airship does not normally use the aerial AI because that fights for control for a lot of the thrusters, and then that can be a little bit weird. Normally we use either land or naval control for this thing, so essentially it acts like a tank. So what I think I need to do is either make this like the Medron Guard, so it backs off to a safe distance and then just kind of stays there, always backing off if the enemy gets too close, essentially like an artillery piece, or I just have it set so this thing stays still when it's within a certain range of the enemy. And that we can do just using the land AI. Either way though, it's going to be slightly different from what I originally envisioned, so bit different now how I'm going to choose to do things. Maybe something like that. So we have a battery of missiles there, then two smaller sections with a similar set. Then maybe we can have some outside rotors just to make this thing look a bit more interesting. I don't really mind how it looks honestly right now, but we need to continue with this sort of style. Lots of spikes and red and dark colours. And let's give this a test. Yep, they go first. Then the larger missiles go. Now, normally we'd be in the air, so this wouldn't happen. Oh, this one finally locked back. Nope, nope, it's... yeah, that's... well... why not make your missiles derpy, eh? Still not 100% sure about how this looks, but I do kind of like how compact and small it's looking, though. Might just continue with that. I think this is going to work out okay. So, we're going to have two turbines, one here, though honestly they are going to be mostly for looks, but they can store perhaps a little bit of ammunition, which will act as a bit of a distraction for enemies, aiming at these pretty much useless sections rather than aiming at the main core. Then, we're going to have something very similar up here as well. So it continues with the two-tiered sort of look. Then we're going to armor up this section here, probably bringing it out to around here, which will be the seating area, and we'll try and make that look nice at least. Yeah, I think that'll work out okay. After that's all done, then we'll work on the bottom, which will be adding the actual ability to fly. Right now, we can somewhat correct our pitch and correct our roll, but we need way more. Okay, so we are almost ready to give this thing a test in terms of at least these. Okay, you do that. You are like that. Okay, 150. Now, how much are these two tiny little turbines, tiny little propeller sections going to do? Now, of course, the pitch is going to be really messed up until we add the back ones, but that seems to be strong enough to almost lift the entire craft. I could potentially have all of our lift just in these external sections. Of course, this is really going to make the whole craft really, really vulnerable. But I'm okay with that. Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, let's do some back sections as well. I think that'll make the whole thing look a little bit better. And then we can start smoothing off the edges and working on the bottom section. Okay, the altitude is set to the same as everything else, so now all I need to do is add a couple more of these to the back. Also, I've just realised something. I believe the control blocks still go off the control block's location, not the average of the craft, whereas the PID go off the craft, not the PID block. That's somewhat problematic, because it means they might be fighting a little bit for altitude control. Well, I can tweak that as I see fit, as I continue anyway. So, with that, let's continue. Let's fill in the back section. Then I can set up the AI to control this thing, and hopefully... we're actually getting pretty close. I'm somewhat happy with this design. I don't think it's going to win any awards, but yeah, it's alright. Yeah, that's not quite as balanced as I was hoping. Might need to make these a little bit weaker, and might need to make the roll a little bit more responsive. I mean, on the upside, that will confuse a lot of weapon types, which is nice, I guess. Even set up the AI very basically. Okay, missiles need to be released way later than that, so that's a problem with the missile systems themselves. Seems like the missiles at the front can be fired way too early. Also, things are way too bright. Need to change the graphics settings still. Ooh, that is so much damage. Lovely. Well, kind of functions already. Just need a few tweaks to make it a bit more pleasing. Okay, there we go. So, I've chosen the easier path. So what I've done is I've set the PID's altitude slightly higher than what the control block wants to set all of these rotors to, which means that we are above the rotors going very, very fast. Now, if the PID is damaged or any of the thrusters and we go below this threshold, which is like literally just here, then these will activate and kick in, so essentially they are secondary. Although they are currently spinning very slowly and providing some lift, they are now mostly for decoration and a backup. I'm okay with that. I'm actually happy with this so far. It's weird. What is happiness? Okay, just doing a couple of tests here. I think they're working as intended. So we are acting very much like the Medran Guard, but more mid-range, and we're using the AI to set up a lot of the stuff. Currently, there is a 100-meter overlap, where both the back thrusters and front thrusters should both be active, which is just activated now. So yeah, that all works as intended. So what's going to happen when it's all fully set up is it should stay about this far away from the target. This way the smaller missiles have a much better chance of actually getting there, and will slowly turn towards the target as well. If the target is further than 500 meters away, then it will continue forwards. If it was only using the large missiles, I'll definitely get it much further away, very similar to the Medran Guard, which would go, I believe, 2,000 meters away. Was it 2,500? I did change that a few times during the building process. Anyway, let's continue. Well, it took way longer than I care to admit, but there we go. It's still not balanced, but at least it's now flat in terms of its rocking around. And it will always target the enemy, even when the AI is off. Because I've decided the AI is not that needed on this thing. So its PID and control blocks are taking over most of the responsibilities. Only really aiming is the job of the AI. So what I have is something like this. All I have is bearing set for between 0 and 179. This will then activate the corresponding, where are you? Complex controller, which activates the correct back thruster. So essentially, if it sees a target on its left, it will then activate this thruster here, which will then throw the entire craft towards the right. No, it will activate this thruster over here, thus causing it to go towards the right, and then vice versa, causing what's happening now. The problem is, what I need is to give them both a little bit of leeway, because currently at least one of them is always active, and this looks absolutely horrible. So I'm going to say if the enemy is maybe 10 degrees, give or take, then neither of them turn on, because this is slowly making me a little bit seasick. There we are, I think that did it. Okay, so we had two issues. First of all, it turns out the AI was still controlling the thrusters. That was my own fault, I completely forgot I did that by default. Whoops-a-daisy. The second thing was I didn't set that lovely little grace section of about 10 degrees. Now that's been set up, everything is working fine. Well, at least one thing hasn't changed. I still absolutely hate placing shields, but we had way too much excess energy, so we had to use that for something. So here we are, lots of medium strength shields. I'm going to add at least one on the bottom, and then we can start redoing the bottom itself. There's still wood exposed in places, and that's because the internal of the craft does have a wooden layer in multiple places. The reason for this is because it makes HESH weapons a little bit less effective, and it also gives a nice insulating layer against EMP. But we don't want it as the outer armor, because it is pretty darn easy to just shear off. So, let's add the last of the shields, be very thankful I'm done with the shields, and then finish off the armor sections. After that, honestly, I think it's about time we give this thing a proper test. Time to give this thing its first proper test then. So, we are going with Deepwater Guard Godlies, and let's go with the Conga. It's the largest, so it makes sense to test out versus the hardest of the Deepwater Guard. Now, our ship is just under 6,000. So, Airship, meet Conga. It now also has 4 of those main large missiles. Okay, incoming the small missiles. The flares have been used, and the missiles have all missed because I don't have target prediction because I'm a dum-dum. Well, that was my own fault. The larger missiles, on the other hand, do have target prediction. Though that sudden drop did throw one of them off, but still, that was apparently enough to send it spiraling into the ground. Wow, those missiles really do need target prediction. That is terrible. Still, a resounding victory, I suppose. Large missiles work, who would have thought? And our little artillery hovercraft has proved itself. At least in terms of aggression. Now, in terms of defense, I'm not too sure. I've been doing a few tests myself, turning things off and on, and I really do feel like if we lose a couple of these on one side, the entire thing will spin out and just end up crashing into the ground. So even on only a few percentage health lost, I'm not too sure about that. I really think I need to buff up how many thrusters are on the top and the bottom to make sure that doesn't happen. So let's test again. The large missiles most likely will not reload. They're basically there for that first volley, after which we're just going to be using these smaller missiles, which still, yeah, just... that inaccuracy is terrible. But there we go, quite a few hits. Oh, apparently I'm about to be hit by shots, but the shields are working. As you can see, the shields keep on coming up, but a few shots are getting through. The shields are only strength, well, between 5 and 7 on the front. As you can see, they are working pretty well. Just not for every single one of them. This is essentially acting like a very small Medran guard, just without the anti-munition systems. The small missiles are definitely doing some work, though, chunking off sections. Oh, yep, there it goes. It is once again going down. It has resisted the onslaught. So, it definitely works against the weakest faction in the game, and honestly, I am more than happy with that. I'm not going to say this is a great design by any means, but I'm happy. The shield at the bottom also doing the job pretty darn well. Are they on proximity? Sorry, not proximity, timed fuses. Yeah, they definitely are. They are exploding after being reflected. Inertial would explode when they are reflected. Okay, so that ends that. But yeah, like I was saying, this cannot use the large missiles after that opening attack. That's all it can do. Then it swaps over to the small missiles more permanently. Still, though, good to see that the flare system idea did work. The flares were definitely still being reloaded by the time the large missiles hit. So huzzah for that. Now, let's mess around with those small missiles. Now using target prediction. That looks better. I love those small missiles so much, but they are so expensive. This is not a cheap craft. This is actually over 90,000 resources. And it's all because of the missile launchers. They cost 800 each for the small missiles. The more I hear is 156, so it is definitely more expensive than our craft, but it's a lot better. We're just missile spam. Did we absorb that shot? I didn't see an explosion. Oh! Apparently explosions are not loading right now. Good to know. I may have kept that last clip in where I was just watching this thing take damage. So 3 of these versus 1 of the new aircraft. There we go, finally starting to falter, and down it goes. What caused the final descent? Not too sure. Oh, no, the front thrusters were all taken out. Yep, all of them bar 1 were taken out. So it can't support itself if all of one section is removed. Well, that's expected. It didn't have enough thrusters on the back for it to possibly deal with that. If it had some upwards thrusters on the back, maybe it could counter that, but then we're just going with so much redundancy, the cost would be insane. Okay. For an artillery craft that really should be out of the way of fire, I am happy enough with this, I really am. Well, at least now it doesn't look like the bottom two missiles are just sort of floating there, so that's good at least. Ooh, actually I do like that, the front section being a little bit lower. In fact, if I had more time, what I would do is bring this all down, then bring that up a little bit. Yeah, and then that could go with this, although then I'm kind of seeing this more as a vertibird, which would be okay, honestly, I think that would be perfectly fine. But for now, let's just give this a quick bit of paint at the bottom, so at least it looks like I've tried to put a bit more effort. I am rapidly running out of time, but I really want to finish this in one video. That would be glorious. But there are a few things I definitely can't do in the time I've got left. Things like adding a very, very simple munition defense, for instance, which would definitely just be the smaller missiles set to use something like missile interceptors or flares or radars, one of those type of things. I also haven't actually added a detection system to this craft. It is currently flying completely blind, which isn't the best outside of sandbox mode. Do I want the whole thing to be red? Yeah, sure. That looks passable. And I've also increased how much engine power is here at the back, which you can probably tell because now everything is rocking because I've got more thrust than I had before with the same settings. Yeah, that needs a bit of tweaking now, but still, excluding the shivering, everything seems to be okay. That's good enough. Okay, I've changed the armor on the inside of here. I've redone the back again, at least in terms of the armoring inside of it. I've altered the shields a little bit because I noticed there were two blind spots here and here. That is no longer the case. And overall, I think I'm okay with how this looks. I like how exposed this thruster is. And now I've said that, I don't like how exposed these are. Okay, going to do one little thing here. And then I think I'm going to say it's a finished craft, which is really weird for me. There are definitely a few things I could spend a bit more time on, but I think at this point I will claim this to be a finished craft. I am really happy with how it's turned out. I think the only section I'm not really happy with is the back, and maybe this kind of bland section here, but overall, I think it looks very Lathrixian. It's definitely looking like something which I would normally build, and I'm happy with this functionality. It's a little bit of a shame I've ended up going with an old system that is the Medran Guard sort of style, but I'm okay with it, I really am. So with that, let's give it a test versus the Plunderer or the Crossbones. Now, the Crossbones should definitely win this. Just putting it out there, this is more of a test to see the missiles. Oh, need a bit of turning first. There go the swarm missiles, and the 4 of the larger missiles have been released. When those crams get there, that's going to be a nightmare. Okay, oh, I want to touch both. Pause. Let's have a quick look, see. Okay, those are mostly going to miss, so we are indeed going to watch the missiles land. Here they come. Huge sections removed there. But definitely not enough to completely kill it, which I think will give it... Oh, look at that bounce! Huzzah for shield bounces! Wait, does the Crossbones not use inertial fuses on the crams? I'm sure it does. Shields! Crams normally do indeed get through shields. And there goes 2 of our rotors. Hopefully we're still able to maintain our altitude. Looks like we will be able to. Missiles crushing some of our own metal. Thankfully not too much. Incoming the next volley. Yep, the shields did very little against that. They did well versus the initial advanced cannons, but that's about it. Wait, is that the shadow from the Crossbones? That's it, catch up. All the new water effects there. Sadly, there is some engineering work being done right outside my window at the moment, which I can just about hear. Hopefully he isn't picking up on the mic. Oh, look at that! How did I get killed? I was at the bottom of the ocean. But either way, that's it. The Crossbones is now victorious. Yeah, managed to take out the thrusters on one side, and it's down. It is trying to roll back, though. In fact, it is slowly rolling back upright, and it is still firing missiles because of that. One last little attempt there. Wow, those water effects are amazing looking. Oh, it stopped aiming. I'm guessing that means dead. No, it's just because it went out of range. Now it's dead, though. Well, it got it down to 83% health. Well done, lad. So with that, I'm afraid I am all out of time for today's video. If you have enjoyed, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. Today's been a lot of fun. I may make some more creations in the future using the missiles, but I think this is a pretty good first attempt. Thank you, and goodbye. Also, name suggestions are very much welcome for this thing.